A rainy curb. A tiny voice. An 8-year-old begs a powerful billionaire to save her mom, right now. He follows the child into a dark hallway and kicks open a door on pure instinct. But this isn't random. The attacker is tied to his own company. The mother is a whistleblower, and the truth could blow up everything. Overnight, rumors explode. A smear campaign hits, child services knocks, the board turns on him. And someone starts erasing the evidence. Fast. Then, a quiet witness steps from the shadows with a thumb drive, and a threat on his life. A town rallies. Veterans stand guard. One night of proof in daylight could save a family, or end a career. He can protect his title, or protect the truth. When power meets courage, who loses? When the final doors open, will a community's voice be enough to keep a mother and child together, or will power tear them apart? Through the rain-streaked window of his penthouse, Evan Hale watched the city lights blur into watery halos, each one bleeding into the next like watercolors on wet canvas. His untouched cup of coffee had long since gone cold, the dark liquid as still as the night around him. The steady drumming of rain against glass only made the little girl's voice clearer in his mind, echoing with heartbreaking clarity. "Please, sir, they're beating my mama." The words cut through him again, sharper than any business negotiation gone wrong. He rubbed his tired eyes, pressing his fingertips against the lids until he saw stars. It was well past midnight, the digital clock on his desk showing 2:17 a.m., but sleep felt impossible, a luxury his conscience wouldn't permit. The image of Sophie's rain-soaked pink jacket and desperate face kept appearing every time he closed his eyes. The way her small hands had clutched at his sleeve, how her chin had quivered while trying to be brave. The mother's bruised arm and proud defiance haunted him too, the way Maya had stood straight despite the purple marks blooming beneath her skin. Evan paced across the polished hardwood floors, his bare feet silent against the expensive oak. The spacious penthouse suddenly felt too big, too empty. The minimal furniture and sleek design more like a museum than a home. The rain created shadows that danced across the walls, making the emptiness more pronounced. He'd written countless checks for worthy causes over the years: domestic violence shelters, children's charities, legal aid. Each one signed with genuine care, but from a comfortable distance. But this was different. This had a face. 2 faces, faces that looked up at him with both fear and hope, vulnerability and strength. "I don't want charity," Maya Torres had said, chin lifted despite her trembling, her dark eyes flashing with a mixture of desperation and dignity. But the fear that had flashed across her face when Brad Kincaid's voice boomed through that thin apartment door told a different story. Raw terror barely contained beneath a brave facade. Evan stopped at his mahogany desk and picked up his phone, the screen illuminating his face in the darkened room. He hesitated only a moment before dialing, his thumb hovering briefly over the contact. "Jim? Sorry to wake you." His head of security answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour, professional as always. "No problem, sir. What do you need?" Jim's voice carried the steadiness that had made Evan hire him 5 years ago. "That man today, Brad Kincaid. I want everything you can find on him by morning. Where he works, his history, any complaints or legal issues. Leave no stone unturned." Evan's voice took on the decisive edge that had helped build Hale Corp from the ground up. "Already started looking, sir. Had a feeling you'd ask." Jim paused, and Evan could hear papers rustling in the background. There's something off about that situation. The way he was acting. That wasn't just some random dispute. It felt calculated, like he had something bigger at stake. "My thoughts exactly." Evan's jaw tightened as he remembered Kincaid's threatening tone, the practiced intimidation in every word. "And I want protection on Maya Torres and her daughter. Discreet surveillance, round the clock. If Kincaid shows up again, we'll handle it," Jim assured him, his voice carrying a protective edge. "I've got our best people on rotation already. Placed them an hour ago. Nobody will get near that apartment without us knowing." Evan felt some of the tension leave his shoulders, a small knot unwinding between his shoulder blades. At least Sophie and her mother would be safe tonight, protected by professionals who knew what they were doing. But he knew this was just the beginning, the first move in what promised to be a complicated situation. Whatever was really going on here, Brad Kincaid's behavior suggested something bigger than a personal vendetta, something that made threatening a single mother worth the risk. Walking back to the floor-to-ceiling window, Evan pressed his forehead against the cool glass, feeling the slight vibration from the storm outside. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory, clear as if she were standing beside him. "Money's just a tool, boy, like a hammer or a saw. What matters is how you use it to help others. That's the only wealth worth counting." She'd raised him after his parents died in that car accident, just 7 years old and suddenly alone. Teaching him about faith and responsibility through quiet example, making him attend church every Sunday in his one good pair of pants, polished shoes gleaming. What would she say about this situation? Probably that God had put those two souls in his path for a reason. That coincidence was just God working anonymously. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the windows with renewed force, rivulets racing down the glass like tears. Somewhere out there, in a rundown apartment building with peeling paint and unreliable heat, a little girl was hopefully sleeping safely while her mother kept watch, perhaps sitting by the door or unable to rest at all. Evan's hands clenched into fists, nails digging into his palms. He'd built his company from nothing, learning to navigate boardrooms and billion-dollar deals with a calm precision that had become legendary in business circles. But this felt more important than any corporate takeover or market expansion. This was about protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. "I don't want charity," Maya had said, those words delivered with such dignity despite her circumstances. Fine. He'd respect that boundary, honor her pride. But there were other ways to help. Legal resources, security, investigation into whatever had Kincaid so worked up and threatening. Evan Hale had power and influence, networks that stretched through every level of the city. And for once he felt absolutely certain about using both. No hesitation, no second-guessing the involvement. His phone buzzed with a text from Jim, the screen illuminating with new information. Initial background checks raising red flags, multiple complaints buried, connection to TrueCon medical supplies. Meeting first thing? 7 a.m., Evan replied, fingers moving quickly across the screen. He finally felt the tiredness creeping in, a heaviness in his limbs that hadn't been there before, but his mind was clearer now, focused with renewed purpose. Tomorrow he'd start getting answers, following whatever trail Kincaid had tried to obscure. More importantly, he'd find a way to help that proud, frightened woman and her brave little girl, whether they wanted his help or not. Some situations transcended preferences, some dangers required intervention. The rain continued falling, sheets of water washing the city clean, but Sophie's desperate plea no longer echoed quite so painfully in his mind. Instead, Evan heard his grandmother's wise voice, gentle but firm as she'd always been. When God puts someone in your path who needs help, that's not a coincidence, that's a calling. And we answer callings, Evan. That's what makes us human. He touched the cold window glass one last time, his fingerprints leaving momentary marks that faded quickly, watching the city lights shimmer through the downpour like stars underwater. Tomorrow would bring answers and action, strategy and solutions. For tonight, He could at least rest, knowing Maya and Sophie were being watched over, protected by invisible guardians stationed nearby. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to erase the fear he'd seen in their eyes. But it was a start. Sometimes his grandmother had taught him, all you need is a place to begin. Evan sat at his desk early the next morning, his fingers drumming against the polished mahogany while he waited. The city outside his floor-to-ceiling windows was still grey and damp from last night's rain, droplets clinging to the glass like tiny crystal beads. The clouds hung low, pressing against the skyscrapers as if trying to peer into his thoughts. Sarah, his executive assistant for the past decade, hurried in with a tablet in hand, her sensible heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Her grey suit was as impeccable as always, a stark contrast to the worried look on her face. "I have that information you requested, Mr. Hale." She paused, her usually composed expression showing concern, a small crease forming between her eyebrows. "Brad Kincaid is actually connected to us, sir. He's a regional manager at Trucon Logistics." Evan's fingers stopped drumming. His breath caught for a moment as the implications settled in his mind. Trucon was their main subcontractor for the new medical supply distribution network, a project worth hundreds of millions, the cornerstone of his company's expansion into healthcare logistics. "Show me everything." Sarah handed him the tablet, and he scrolled through employment records, project assignments, and performance reviews. Brad Kincaid had been with Trucon for 15 years, climbing steadily through the ranks. The personnel file showed commendations for efficiency and cost-cutting measures, but nothing about his character or management style. The photo showed a man with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Get my car ready," he said, standing abruptly and straightening his tie. "I need to check on something personally." The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like a physical thing. The drive to City General took 20 minutes through streets still slick with rain. Evan spent it reviewing more documents on his phone, his unease growing with each detail, his reflection in the car window looking increasingly troubled. Trucon handled critical medical supplies, everything from bandages to surgical equipment. If there were problems with their inventory reporting, he couldn't even finish the thought without his stomach clenching. He found Maya at a supply station on the 3rd floor, organizing boxes of surgical gloves with methodical precision. She looked tired but collected, her dark hair pulled back neatly, shadows under her eyes telling of a restless night. When she saw him, her cheeks flushed, and her hands momentarily froze mid-task. "Mr. Hale," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was within earshot, her body language immediately shifting to something more guarded. "You didn't need to come here. I wanted to make sure you and Sophie were okay after last night." He kept his voice low, noting her nervousness and the way her eyes darted to the hallway. "And I found out some concerning information about Brad Kincaid." Maya's hands tightened on the box she was holding, her knuckles turning white. "He works for Trucon. I know." She set the box down carefully, then met his eyes with a directness that spoke of hard-won courage. "Look, I appreciate your concern, but this is complicated. I filed a safety complaint about falsified inventory reports, critical supplies that were listed as checked and verified but weren't actually there." Her voice dropped even lower. "Surgical instruments, emergency medications, sterile dressings, things patients' lives depend on. Brad—" She swallowed hard, a flash of fear crossing her face. He didn't take it well. Evan felt his stomach tighten into a cold knot. The fluorescent lights overhead suddenly seemed harsh and exposing. "That's a serious allegation. Have you spoken to HR?" "Please." Maya shook her head firmly, a bitter smile touching her lips. "I can't risk losing this job. Sophie depends on me and the benefits here." Her fingers unconsciously touched a hospital ID badge clipped to her scrubs. She straightened her shoulders, drawing herself up with quiet dignity. I shouldn't have said anything. Just forget it. If there are safety violations, Mr. Hale. Maya's voice was quiet but firm as steel. Her eyes held a weary knowledge of systems that didn't protect people like her. Thank you for helping last night, really, but I need to handle this my way. He wanted to argue, but her expression stopped him. This wasn't about pride anymore, it was about survival. For her and Sophie both. He recognized the look of someone calculating risks with no good options. Back at his office an hour later, Robert Chen, his chief compliance officer, was waiting. The usually unflappable man looked worried, pacing near the window with his hands clasped behind his back. His normally pristine suit jacket was unbuttoned, a small tell of his agitation. "We need to talk about TrueCon," Robert said as soon as Evan's door closed, not bothering with pleasantries. "If there are problems with their inventory verification." He hesitated, rubbing his temple. "Sir, this could stall the entire national rollout. We're talking about medical supplies for hundreds of hospitals, thousands of patients, everything from routine procedures to emergency surgeries." Evan walked to his window, looking out at the city below, where people went about their lives trusting in systems they couldn't see. Raindrops raced down the glass, merging and splitting like the decisions before him. What had seemed like a simple act of helping a frightened girl and her mother was expanding into something much larger, with tendrils reaching into places he hadn't anticipated. If Maya's allegations were true, how many patients could be affected? How many hospitals were already working with compromised supply chains? How many surgeons might reach for something critical only to find it missing? "Do we have any other complaints about TrueCon's reporting?" he asked, his reflection in the window looking more resolved than he felt. "Nothing official," Robert replied carefully, choosing his words with precision. "But there have been whispers, especially in Brad Kincaid's region. Nurses saying supplies aren't where they should be. Surgical teams having to improvise. Documentation that looks perfect on paper but doesn't match reality on the ground." Evan thought of Maya's bruised arm, the fingerprint marks still visible beneath her sleeve. He thought of Sophie's desperate plea in the rain, her small voice rising above the downpour with surprising strength. Then he thought of surgery rooms across the country, of patients trusting their lives to properly stocked medical supplies, of families in waiting rooms hoping for the best. "This isn't just about a neighborhood dispute anymore, is it?" he said quietly, his breath fogging the glass momentarily. "No, sir," Robert agreed, his reflection joining Evan's in the window. "I'm afraid it's not." Maya's words echoed in his mind like a warning bell. Critical supplies that were listed as checked and verified, but weren't actually there. The implications were staggering, branching out like cracks in safety glass. This wasn't just about one woman's safety anymore, though that still mattered deeply. This was about public safety on a massive scale, about trust, about lives hanging in the balance while someone falsified paperwork to cover their tracks. The evening shadows lengthened as Maya sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. Another message from Brad lit up the screen. "You think you're safe? You haven't seen what I can do to people who cross me." Sophie pressed closer to her mother's side, her small fingers gripping Maya's sleeve. Outside, police sirens wailed in the distance, making them both jump. Maya wrapped her arm around her daughter, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, but Sophie's wide eyes told her the little girl wasn't convinced. The phone buzzed again. Maya's hand shook as she deleted Brad's latest threat without reading it. She had saved screenshots of the earlier messages, just in case. A gentle knock at the door made them both freeze. "Maya, it's Evan Hale." Maya peered through the peephole to confirm it was him before opening the door. Evan wasn't alone. Next to him stood an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, wearing a neat cardigan despite the warm evening. "This is Ruth Ellis," Evan said. "She runs the community aid network at First Methodist." Ruth's smile was warm and no nonsense. "Maya, honey, we need to get you and your little one somewhere safe tonight." Maya started to shake her head, but Ruth continued. "I've got plenty of room at my house, and my husband Cal's already loading up his truck to help move whatever you need." "I can't impose," Maya began. "It's not imposing when it's neighbors helping neighbors," Ruth said firmly. She knelt down to Sophie's level. "And I've got chocolate chip cookies cooling on the counter at home." Sophie's eyes lit up for the first time that evening. She tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Please, Mama. I'm scared here." Maya's resistance crumbled at her daughter's words. She looked at Evan, who nodded encouragingly. "Just for a few days," he said quietly. "While we sort things out, I'm putting our internal audit team on. TrueCon's records first thing tomorrow." Within an hour, Cal Ellis had arrived in his pickup truck. He was a tall, lean man with weathered features who moved with the quiet efficiency of someone used to getting things done. He and Evan carried boxes while Ruth helped Maya pack essentials for her and Sophie. "Vietnam, 68 to 70, Cal mentioned to Evan as they loaded the truck. "Learned there that sometimes the best thing you can do is help people get to safety." His voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes were watchful as he scanned the street. Ruth's house was in a well-kept neighborhood of modest homes with tidy yards. Inside, everything was clean and cozy, with handmade quilts draped over comfortable furniture. The kitchen smelled of cookies and coffee. Sophie curled up on the couch with a cookie and Ruth's old cat, her eyes growing heavy as the adults talked in low voices around the kitchen table. "I've got the guest room ready upstairs," Ruth said, pouring coffee. "And plenty of food in the freezer. Cal installed new security lights last month, and we know all our neighbors." Maya wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "I don't know how to thank you all." "You don't need to thank anyone," Cal said firmly. "What you need to do is rest. Everything else can wait till morning." Evan pulled out his phone and showed Maya a series of emails. "I've already contacted our head of internal audit. They'll start reviewing TrueCon's records tomorrow, focusing on Brad's region first. We'll do this by the book, completely above board." "What if—" Maya glanced at her sleeping daughter. "What if he tries something else?" "That's why you're here," Ruth said, patting her hand. "Cal and I have helped plenty of folks through rough times. Nobody bothers anyone under our roof." Cal nodded, his expression suggesting that this was an understatement. As midnight approached, Maya carried Sophie up to the guest room. The little girl barely stirred as her mother tucked her into the freshly made bed. Evan gathered his keys to leave, feeling the weight of exhaustion but also relief. Ruth walked him to the door. "You did good bringing them here," she said quietly. "Now go home and get some rest. We'll keep them safe." He nodded, too tired for words. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and empty roads. As he finally crawled into bed, his last thought was of Sophie's peaceful face as she slept on Ruth's couch, finally feeling secure. Across town, in his darkened office, Brad Kincaid sat at his desk, his face lit by the glow of his computer screen. His fingers moved rapidly over the keyboard as he began systematically altering records, planning how to discredit Maya's claims, and Maya herself. The threat she posed to his career would have to be eliminated, one way or another. The late morning sun streamed through the lace curtains of Ruth's guest room as Maya folded fresh laundry, trying to create some sense of normalcy. Sophie had been at her new school for 2 days now, and the routine was helping them both adjust. The little girl had even made a friend during recess yesterday. A knock at the front door echoed through the house. Maya heard Ruth's footsteps in the hallway, followed by a brief exchange of voices. Then Ruth called up the stairs, her voice tight with concern. "Maya, honey, could you come down here a minute?" Maya descended the stairs to find Ruth holding a thick manila envelope, her usually warm face creased with worry. A courier's retreating form was visible through the window. "It's marked urgent and legal," Ruth said, handing over the envelope. Maya's hands trembled as she opened it. The first page bore an official letterhead from Preston and Associates, Legal Services. As she read, the blood drained from her face. They're accusing me of stealing medical supplies." Her voice cracked. "And tampering with inventory data to cover it up. They want me to cease and desist all communication about TrueCon or face criminal charges." Ruth guided her to the kitchen table as Maya's legs gave way. "Let me see that, dear." Maya's tears fell onto the threatening legal language as she continued reading. "They say they have evidence I've been reselling hospital supplies on the black market, that I manipulated the safety reports to hide my theft." She pressed her hands to her face. "How could they? I would never—" Ruth was already on the phone. "Evan, you need to get over here right now. They're trying to destroy this girl's reputation." While they waited, Ruth made tea and held Maya's hand as she sobbed. "I could lose my job, my license. Sophie—" The thought of her daughter made her cry harder. 20 minutes later, Evan's car pulled into the driveway. Ruth let him in, and he strode to the kitchen table, his face grim. "May I?" he asked, reaching for the papers. Maya nodded mutely. Evan's expression darkened as he read. He stopped at one page, his jaw tightening. "These inventory forms, these are the same ones you signed when you first reported the safety violations, aren't they?" Maya wiped her eyes and looked more closely. "Yes, but the numbers are different. Someone's changed them." "And look here," Evan said, pointing to the top of one page. "See this contract header, Hale Corp supply chain verification. They're not just coming after you, Maya. They're trying to undermine my company's credibility too. If these accusations stick, it could cast doubt on our entire medical distribution system." Ruth set a fresh cup of tea in front of him. "What can we do?" Evan spread the papers across the table, his business mind already analyzing angles. "First, we document everything. Maya, do you have copies of the original forms you submitted?" She nodded. "In my email, and I printed copies too. They're in my apartment." "Good. We'll get those." He pulled out his phone and began typing notes. "We'll need to bring in our legal team, but not just for defense. We're going to launch a full investigation into TrueCon's practices." Maya's hands shook as she lifted her tea. "What about Sophie? If they press charges—" "They won't," Evan said firmly, "because we're going to prove they falsified these documents. Brad's gotten sloppy. He's using official Hale Corp paperwork to try to discredit you. That means he's left a trail." Ruth squeezed Maya's shoulder. "And you've got witnesses, honey. Everyone at that hospital knows your character. No one who knows you would believe these lies. My board of directors will have to be notified," Evan said, running a hand through his hair. "Some of them won't be happy. TrueCon's contract is worth millions, but if they're willing to go this far to silence you, what else are they hiding?" Maya looked up at him, her voice small. "I'm so sorry to bring all this trouble to your company." "No," Evan said firmly. "You did exactly what you should have done. You reported dangerous practices that could harm patients. I'm the one who should be sorry it took this long for me to see what was happening in my own supply chain." He gathered the papers into a neat stack. "This ends now, even if I have to go before the board myself." Ruth nodded approvingly. "Now you're talking sense. Maya, finish your tea. I'll call the school and let them know I'll be picking Sophie up today. We don't need her walking home with all this going on." Maya wrapped her hands around her teacup, drawing strength from the warmth and from the determined faces of her protectors. The accusations still stung, But she wasn't alone anymore. For the first time since the courier arrived, she felt a flicker of hope. Evan was already making calls, his voice steady and authoritative as he set things in motion. "Jim, I need you to pull every contract and verification form from TrueCon for the past year. Yes, everything. And get Linda from legal up to my office. We've got a situation." Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Evan's corner office, but it did little to brighten his mood. He stood at his desk, reviewing the preliminary findings from last night's document, pull when Charles Morton, his CFO, strode in without knocking. "Evan, we need to talk about this TrueCon situation." Charles adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his expression stern. "The legal department can handle any disputes with our contractors. There's no need for you to get personally involved." Evan looked up from the papers. "They're using fraudulent documents to threaten an innocent woman." "Allegedly fraudulent," Charles corrected. "And that's exactly why we have lawyers. You're the CEO. Your involvement could be seen as prejudicing the investigation." "What about the safety violations Maya reported? The falsified inventory records?" Charles sighed. "Look, I get it. You met this woman. You want to help. But TrueCon handles 30% of our medical distribution. The board is already nervous about your decision to authorize an independent audit." A moment, Sophie's frightened face flashed through Evan's mind, her wide eyes in the rain, begging for help. He straightened his shoulders. "The audit goes forward, and I want the results on my desk, not buried in legal." "You're taking an unnecessary risk," Charles warned. "Let the system work. The system failed Maya once already." Evan's voice was quiet but firm. "I won't let it happen again." After Charles left, Evan spent hours in meetings, but his thoughts kept drifting to Maya and Sophie. By evening, he found himself driving to Ruth's house, a bag of take-out Chinese food in the passenger seat. Ruth answered his knock with a warm smile. "Well, look who's right on time for dinner." She ushered him into the cozy living room, where Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by crayons and paper. The little girl looked up and broke into a shy smile. "Mr. Hale, I made something for you." She held up a drawing, clearly proud of her work. Evan knelt beside her to get a better look. The paper showed a stick figure holding what appeared to be a large blue umbrella over two smaller figures. Rain filled the background in dramatic blue streaks. "That's you," Sophie explained, pointing. "With your umbrella from when you helped us. See? That's me and Mama." Evan felt his throat tighten. "It's beautiful, Sophie. Thank you." Maya emerged from the kitchen, looking tired but composed. "You didn't have to bring dinner." "Least I could do," he said, standing up. "How are you holding up?" She gave a small shrug. "Taking it day by day. Ruth's been amazing, but—" She glanced at Sophie, lowering her voice. "I can't rely on everyone forever. I need to figure out our next steps." They moved to the dining room, where Ruth efficiently served the Chinese food onto proper plates. "We eat like civilized folks at this table," she declared. Sophie chatted about her new school while the adults tried to keep the conversation light. After dinner, while Ruth supervised Sophie's homework, Evan and Maya stepped onto the back porch. The evening air was cool and crickets chirped in Ruth's garden. "I want you to know," Evan said, "the independent auditors start tomorrow. We're going to get to the bottom of this." Maya wrapped her arms around herself. "You don't have to put yourself out like this. I'm sure your board—" "Let me worry about the board." He turned to face her. "You did the right thing, reporting those violations. You won't have to fight alone anymore." She studied his face in the porch light, as if searching for doubt or hesitation. "Why are you doing all this?" Before he could answer, Ruth appeared in the doorway. "Sophie's asking for her mama. Time for bed." Maya nodded. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Hale. And For everything." After Maya went inside, Ruth lingered on the porch. She settled into one of the wooden rocking chairs, gesturing for Evan to take the other. "You know," she said, her voice thoughtful, "sometimes the Lord sends one stubborn soul to remind the rest of us what decency looks like." Evan gave a quiet laugh. "I'm not sure I qualify as decent. I just couldn't walk away." "Exactly." Ruth's rocker creaked gently. Most folks would have written a check or called the police and considered their duty done. But you saw people in trouble and chose to get involved. That's not nothing. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, listening to the crickets. Through the window, Evan could hear Sophie's muffled voice asking for one more story. "I should go," he said finally, standing up. "Long day tomorrow." Ruth walked him to his car. "You're doing the right thing, Evan. Don't let anyone tell you different." Driving home, Evan thought about Charles's warnings and the board's concerns, but he also thought about Sophie's crayon drawing with its simple declaration of trust. Sometimes doing the right thing meant getting your hands dirty. He'd built his company from nothing. He could rebuild it if necessary. But he couldn't rebuild his conscience if he walked away now. The next few days settled into an uneasy rhythm. Maya found purpose helping Ruth organize medical supplies at her small neighborhood clinic, while Sophie adjusted to her new school. The little girl's backpack now hung beside the coat rack in Ruth's entryway, a splash of pink against the warm wood paneling. At Hale Corp, Evan's audit team worked methodically through stacks of TrueCon documentation. They requested years of invoices, shipping manifests, and internal communications. The conference room they'd commandeered looked like a paper hurricane had swept through, walls covered in timeline charts, boxes of files stacked in corners. "We're building the picture," Sarah, his lead auditor, reported, "but someone's been careful about covering tracks." That Sunday morning found Evan sliding into a back pew at Ruth's church, feeling oddly nervous. The wooden bench creaked as he sat down. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the worn hymnals. He spotted Maya and Sophie a few rows ahead, the little girl's head resting against her mother's shoulder. Ruth stood to make announcements, her voice carrying clearly through the sanctuary. "We have some special friends with us today," she said warmly. "Maya Torres and her daughter Sophie are staying with Cal and me for a while, and Mr. Evan Hale has joined us as well. We're blessed to have them here." Evan felt dozens of curious eyes turn his way. He managed a small smile and nod. Cal stepped forward next, his weathered face solemn. "Let us pray together," he said, bowing his head. "Lord, we ask for your truth to light dark places. Protect those who speak up for what's right. Give wisdom to those seeking justice, and remind us all that your love is stronger than fear. Amen." "Amen," the congregation echoed. After the service, people lingered in small groups, sharing coffee and conversation. Ruth found Evan standing alone, studying a wall of old church photos. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, joining him. Evan was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother used to bring me to a church like this," he said finally. "After my parents died in the car accident, I was 7. Ruth's face softened with understanding. That must have been hard. She was amazing. Worked 2 jobs, never missed a school event. He traced the edge of a frame with his finger. But there was always this distance. Like if I needed too much, she might break. So I learned to handle things alone. And now I'm involved in something I can't handle alone." He turned to face her. "I've never let myself care this deeply about other people's problems before. It's terrifying." Ruth squeezed his arm gently. "That's called having a heart, dear. Takes some getting used to." Across town in his corner office, Brad Kincaid was having a very different kind of Sunday. He paced behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care how you do it," he snapped. "Those requisition forms from last quarter, they need to disappear. All of them." He paused, listening. "Don't give me excuses, Jim. If this gets out, we're all done. Every one of us who looked the other way." He yanked open his desk drawer, pulling out a bottle of antacids. His hands shook slightly as he popped two in his mouth. "The board audit team's been asking questions," he continued. "They're close, too close. Just handle it." He ended the call and slumped in his chair, rubbing his temples. A photo on his desk caught his eye. Him shaking hands with the company president at last year's awards dinner. His region had shown the highest profit margins 4 quarters running. Nobody had asked too many questions about how. Back at Ruth's clinic, Maya sorted through boxes of donated supplies, creating neat inventory lists. The familiar work calmed her nerves. Through the window, she could see Sophie playing hopscotch with neighborhood kids in the parking lot, her laughter carrying faintly through the glass. Ruth appeared in the doorway. "You've organized this storage room better than I ever could," she said admiringly. "It's the least I can do." Maya checked off another item on her list. "Though I keep wondering what's happening with the audit. If they'll find anything. Truth has a way of coming to light." Ruth said, "Sometimes it just needs a little help from stubborn people who won't back down." Maya managed a small smile. "I hope you're right." At Hale Corp, Evan's audit team worked through the weekend, piecing together evidence. Sarah knocked on his office door late Sunday afternoon, looking tired but determined. "We found something," she said simply. Evan gestured for her to sit. "Tell me." "There's a pattern in the shipping manifests. Dates that don't match, quantities that don't add up. Someone's been very clever about it, but once you know what to look for..." She spread several documents across his desk. Maya was right. The safety violations are just the tip of the iceberg. Evan studied the papers, his jaw tightening. "Keep going," he said quietly. "Document everything." The sun was setting as he drove home that evening, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He thought about Maya's courage in speaking up, about Sophie's crayon drawing still pinned to his office wall, about his grandmother's quiet strength all those years ago. Sometimes doing the right thing meant standing alone. But sometimes he was learning. It meant letting others stand with you. The fluorescent lights hummed in the empty office as Sarah, the lead auditor, stared at her computer screen. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. She blinked, making sure she was reading the email thread correctly. "Mr. Hale needs to see this," she muttered, reaching for her phone. 20 minutes later, Evan stood behind her desk, his face growing darker as he read. The email chain was damning. A series of messages about streamlined compliance protocols for medical supply shipments. But what caught his eye was Maya's electronic signature on forms she'd never seen, alongside Stephen Laird's approval stamp. Stephen, his own VP of operations. "When did you find this?" Evan asked, his voice tight. "Just now. The timestamps show they backdated Maya's approvals." Sarah pointed to specific lines. "They needed a scapegoat with actual hospital credentials. When she started asking questions, they tried to discredit her first, then frighten her into silence." Evan straightened up, his decision made. Print everything. Then go home and get some rest. The drive to Ruth's house seemed longer than usual. Streetlights cast long shadows across his dashboard as he rehearsed what to say. How do you tell someone they were deliberately framed by people you trusted? Ruth answered his knock, taking in his grim expression. "Maya's in the kitchen," she said softly. "I'll keep Sophie occupied." Maya looked up from a cup of tea as he entered. "This late. What's wrong?" Evan sat down across from her, placing the folder on the table. "We found proof," he said gently. The audit team uncovered emails showing your signature was forged on safety compliance forms. Maya's hands tightened around her mug. Forged. Yes, they needed someone with medical credentials to take the fall if things went wrong. He slid the papers toward her. And it goes higher than Brad. One of my own executives was involved. Maya flipped through the documents, her face pale. All those times I thought I was going crazy, doubting myself. Her voice cracked. They made me look like I was lying. You weren't lying. You were right all along. Evan leaned forward. I promise you, we're going to make this right. But it might take time to handle properly. These people have resources, connections. A small noise made them both turn. Sophie stood in the doorway in her pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. I heard talking, she said quietly. Ruth appeared behind her. Sorry, she slipped away while I was folding laundry. Sophie's eyes darted between the adults. Why do you look scared? What's danger? What proof? Maya started to rise, but Sophie backed away. I heard those words. Are we safe now? The question hung in the air. Evan met her worried gaze, remembering his own childhood fears after losing his parents. Sophie, he said carefully, we're working very hard to make sure you and your mom are safe, and we won't stop until we know you are. You promise? I promise. Sophie seemed to consider this. Okay, she said finally. But can we keep the nightlight on? Of course, sweetheart. Maya held out her arms, and Sophie ran to hug her. Outside, Cal Ellis moved quietly through the yard, tools in hand. The new motion sensor lights he was installing would illuminate every approach to the house. He'd seen enough in Vietnam to know that darkness favored those with bad intentions. He tightened the last fixture, checking its angle. Light spilled across the driveway, pushing back the shadows. Through the kitchen window, he could see the others talking, their faces serious but determined. Inside, Maya was reading through the emails again, her hands steadier now. So what happens next? We build our case carefully, Evan replied. Document everything. Then when we move, we do it in a way that leaves no room for denial or cover-up. Ruth brought fresh tea, squeezing Maya's shoulder as she set it down. Remember what we say in nursing. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. 5 Ps. Maya smiled faintly. We used to repeat that during inventory counts. Her smile faded. The same inventory counts they used to frame me. Not anymore, Evan said firmly. Now we use their own paper trail against them. Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch, her rabbit tucked under her chin. Maya watched her daughter's peaceful face. She's been so brave through all this. Children often are, Ruth said softly. They remind us what real courage looks like. A gentle tap at the back door announced Cal's return. Security lights are up, he reported quietly. Motion sensors will catch anyone coming within 50 feet of the house. Evan stood, gathering the documents. Thank you, Cal, for everything. Just doing what needs doing, Cal replied simply. It was what he'd always done, from the jungles of Vietnam to this quiet suburban street, protecting those who needed protection. Maya walked Evan to his car, hugging herself against the evening chill. I didn't expect... She hesitated. When Sophie ran to find help that day in the rain, I never thought anyone would actually listen, let alone believe me. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places, Evan said, and sometimes doing the right thing means admitting where we've been wrong. He thought of Stephen's betrayal, the years of trust now broken. We all have choices to make. The new security lights cast a protective glow as he drove away. In his rearview mirror, he could see Maya standing in the doorway, Ruth's arm around her shoulders. They would get through this, he thought. Truth had a way of demanding to be heard, even in the darkest places. Morning sunlight streamed through Ruth's kitchen windows as she answered yet another call. "Yes, Martha, that's so kind of you. The casserole would be wonderful." She jotted another note on her already full notepad, the page now covered with names, food offerings, and times. "Tomorrow at 6? Perfect, we really appreciate it." The phone rang again almost immediately. Ruth shook her head with a gentle smile as she picked up, her fingers already reaching for her pen. The news about Maya's case and corporate wrongdoing had spread through their tight-knit community like wildfire, igniting a response nobody had anticipated. "Ruth's house," she answered warmly. "Oh, Pastor Jim. Yes, the prayer chain is already working overtime." In the living room, Maya sat surrounded by cards and notes from neighbors she'd never met. A rainbow of envelopes covered the coffee table, some store-bought with printed messages, others clearly handmade with careful attention. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, running her fingers over a handmade card decorated with hearts and flowers, the glitter catching the light. "All these people. They don't even know me." "That's what community does," Ruth said, covering the phone's mouthpiece with her palm. "We hold each other up. That's how God designed us to work." She turned her attention back to her call, nodding as she listened. Outside, Cal Ellis stood with 3 other veterans in his driveway. They hunched over a simple map of the neighborhood spread across the hood of his truck, discussing patrol routes. The men's weathered faces were serious, focused on the task at hand. "Mike, you take the morning school shift, 7:30 to 9. Jim, afternoon pickup from 2:30 to 4. Pete, evening clinic rounds from 6 on to 8 towns." He pointed to different streets with his calloused finger. "Keep it casual, but visible. Nothing that looks like we're playing soldier, understand? Just neighbors looking out for neighbors?" The men nodded, understanding without words. Their stance shifted slightly, shoulders squaring with purpose. They'd all seen enough in their service years to know that sometimes the simplest presence could prevent trouble. It was a language they all spoke, the quiet vigilance of men who'd learned the hard way what happens when good people stand aside. "We've got coffee and donuts at my place for anyone coming off shift," Cal added, folding the map. "Ruth's orders." Across town, Evan straightened his tie before facing the local media gathered in Hale Corp's conference room. He took a deep breath, centering himself. Through the glass doors, he could see a dozen reporters, cameras, and recording equipment. Camera lights flashed as he stepped to the podium, the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "Hale Corp has always stood for integrity," he began, his voice steady despite the flutter of nervousness in his stomach. "Recent allegations of safety violations and document falsification are being thoroughly investigated. While I cannot share specific details during this ongoing audit, I want to be clear. Ethical business practices are not negotiable at this company and never will be under my leadership." Questions flew rapid fire from all corners of the room, voices overlapping in their urgency. "Mr. Hale, can you confirm the whistleblower's identity? Are these allegations connected to last year's product recall? Will there be layoffs if production is halted?" Evan handled each carefully, neither confirming nor denying names, protecting the investigation's integrity while showing his company's commitment to truth. His years of corporate training served him well now, allowing him to navigate the minefield of questions without revealing Maya's involvement or compromising the investigation. "We are reviewing every step in our quality control process," he explained, making eye contact with the most aggressive reporter. "And yes, I am personally overseeing this audit." By late afternoon, exhaustion showed in the slight slump of his shoulders as he drove to Ruth's house. The day had been a marathon of meetings, calls with the board of directors, and careful statements to concerned stakeholders. The familiar smell of home cooking greeted him at the door, roast beef, fresh bread, and something sweet he couldn't quite identify. "Mr. Hale," Sophie called out, running to meet him. Her face lit up with recognition and delight. She wore a paint-smudged apron that hung nearly to her ankles and held up colourful paper covered with bright swirls and stick figures. "Look what I made in art class today. Mrs. Peterson said it was extra special." Evan knelt to examine her artwork, feeling the day's tension melt away at her enthusiasm. "That's beautiful, Sophie. Is that your school?" He pointed to a rectangular building with stick-figure children playing outside. "Uh-huh. Tomorrow we're having kindness circle." She looked up at him hopefully, her eyes wide and earnest. "Will you come? We're supposed to bring someone who helps others. Mum says you're helping us lots and lots." The simple request caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked him to just show up? Not for a meeting or a donation, but simply to be present, to be recognized not for his wealth or position, but for helping. "I'd be honored," he said softly, feeling a lump form in his throat. "What time?" Sophie beamed, bouncing on her toes. 10 o'clock, and Miss Thompson says we can have cookies after." At the dinner table, conversation flowed easily around plates of Ruth's comfort food. Ruth served her famous meatloaf with mashed potatoes, while Cal quietly passed dishes, keeping water glasses filled without being asked. Maya shared stories from her nursing shifts at the hospital, and Sophie giggled about playground adventures and her new friend Lily, who could jump double Dutch. "The Hendersons brought 3 pies today," Ruth mentioned, serving dessert on her good china plates. "Apple, cherry, and that chocolate one you like, Cal." She smiled at her husband. "And Mrs. Chen from the grocery store insisted on sending groceries, 2 whole bags of fresh produce and a ham." "The whole town's rallying," Cal added, cutting his pie into careful bites. "Good people standing up for what's right. Sheriff Adams stopped by, too, said he'd increase patrols near the house just as a precaution." Maya shook her head in wonder, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "I never expected—" She paused, blinking back tears that suddenly welled up. "When I first reported those safety violations, I felt so alone, like I was shouting into the wind." "You're not alone anymore," Evan said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "Not by a long shot." After dinner, Sophie convinced everyone to play Uno, spreading the colourful cards across Ruth's polished dining table. Her infectious laughter filled the room as she gleefully made Evan draw 4 cards, clapping her hands with childish delight at his exaggerated groan of defeat. For a moment, he forgot about corporate politics and board meetings, profit margins and press statements. Here, he was just Evan, the man who'd followed a little girl through the rain because she asked for help. When it was time to leave, Maya walked him to the porch. The security light Cal had installed cast a warm golden glow around them, illuminating the potted geraniums Ruth had arranged by the steps. Crickets chirped in the darkness beyond, a peaceful nighttime chorus. "Thank you," she said quietly, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the evening chill. "For everything you're doing, not just the investigation, but—" She gestured toward the house where Sophie was helping Ruth with dishes, their silhouettes visible through the kitchen window. "This, being here, making her feel safe again, making us both feel like we matter." Evan looked at Maya, really looked at her, saw the strength it had taken to stand up for what was right, to protect her daughter, to trust again after betrayal. The warm light softened her features, highlighting the quiet determination in her eyes. "I'm not doing this out of obligation," he said, "or guilt about my company's involvement. It stopped being about that a while ago." "I know," she replied softly, a small smile playing at her lips. "That's what makes it mean so much more." He walked to his car, feeling her eyes on him. As he pulled away, he glanced in his rearview mirror. Maya stood framed in the doorway, the porch light creating a gentle halo around her silhouette. The sight stirred something in his heart he'd kept locked away for years, something warm and unfamiliar, yet somehow like coming home. When had this stopped being about corporate responsibility and damage control? When had these people, Ruth with her endless compassion and homemade pies, Cal with his quiet strength and watchful eyes, Sophie with her bright spirit and colourful drawings, and Maya with her unwavering integrity and gentle smile, become more than just a case to solve? The answer was simple, really. They'd become family. And somewhere along the way, Evan had remembered what it felt like to belong to something bigger than balance sheets and boardrooms, something real. Sunlight streamed through the elementary school windows as 24 third-graders sat cross-legged in their kindness circle. Construction paper hearts decorated the walls, each bearing messages like, "Be nice and help others." Evan sat on a tiny plastic chair, his knees nearly touching his chest, but his smile was genuine. Sophie bounced with excitement as she waited her turn. And now Sophie would like to introduce her special guest, Mrs. Peterson announced warmly. Sophie stood up straight and proud. "This is Mr. Evan. He helped me and my mama when we were scared. He gave us friends like Miss Ruth and Mr. Cal, and he believes people should tell the truth." She beamed at him. "He's teaching me that kind people are stronger than mean ones." The simple honesty of her words touched something deep in Evan's heart. The class erupted in their practiced cheer. "Kindness matters! Kindness matters!" After the presentations, Evan suggested a trip to Riverside Park. "It's too beautiful to waste the afternoon indoors," he said, watching Sophie's eyes light up. The park sprawled along the water's edge, dotted with weeping willows and flowering dogwoods. Spring had painted everything in soft greens and pinks. Sophie ran ahead to the duck pond, clutching a paper bag of breadcrumbs Ruth had packed. "Careful near the water," Maya called, but her voice held more joy than worry today. They found a sunny bench near the pond's edge. Sophie tossed breadcrumbs with careful aim, giggling as the ducks waddled and quacked around her feet. "Look, Mama, that one has babies!" She pointed to a mother duck leading a line of tiny ducklings. Maya watched her daughter, eyes glistening. "I haven't heard her laugh like that in weeks," she said softly. Then she turned to Evan, her expression serious. "I need to apologize for being so defensive when we first met. I was scared and proud and—" "Maya," Evan interrupted gently, "strength doesn't need to apologize." She blinked, surprised. "What?" "Standing up for what's right, protecting your daughter, maintaining your dignity even when others tried to take it away. That's strength. Never apologize for that." A few feet away, Sophie had started making up names for each duckling. "This one's Waddles, and that's Splashy, and the little one is Tiny Tim." Neither adult noticed the local photographer, Amanda Chen, capturing the moment. Sophie's face lit with laughter, Evan and Maya on the bench behind her, spring blossoms scattered across the scene. Amanda had been taking pictures for the community newsletter, but something about this image made her pause. She knew Evan Hale by reputation, had heard whispers about the controversy surrounding Maya and her daughter. But this moment told a different story. Later that afternoon, Amanda shared the photo with her cousin who worked in Hale Corp's marketing department. Within hours, the image appeared on the company's internal message board with the simple caption, "Why Safety Matters." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooded in from employees across all departments. "This is what we're fighting for. Real leaders protect people. Proud to work for a company that stands up for what's right." Evan returned home that evening with the warm spring sun still lingering in the sky. His house felt different somehow, less like a showcase and more like a home. He found himself humming as he made coffee, remembering Sophie's duck names and Maya's smile. His phone buzzed. Jessica Chen, his PR chief, sounded tense. "Have you seen what Brad's people are doing with that park photo?" "What photo?" "It's all over social media now. They're spinning it, Evan, claiming you're exploiting that little girl for publicity, using her as a shield while you dismantle TrueCon's reputation." The warmth of the afternoon turned cold. Evan gripped the phone tighter, thinking of Sophie's innocent joy feeding those ducks, of Maya finally letting down her guard. "They're saying you orchestrated the whole thing," Jessica continued. "That you planted the photographer. That it's all a PR stunt to cover up broader supply chain issues." Evan thought of Sophie standing proud in her classroom, declaring that kind people were stronger than mean ones. "Send me everything they're posting," he said firmly. "Every comment, every accusation." "Evan, maybe we should distance ourselves from—" "No," he cut in, his voice quiet but steel strong. "We're not playing their game. That little girl trusted me to help make things right. I won't let them twist that into something ugly." The coffee sat forgotten on the counter as Evan stared out his kitchen window. The same sun that had made everything glow at the park now cast long shadows across his backyard. But he refused to let Brad's darkness touch the pure joy of that afternoon. Maya and Sophie's truth was stronger than any lie Brad could spin. Evan had learned that lesson watching a small girl in a rain-soaked pink jacket, brave enough to ask a stranger for help. Sometimes the simplest truths were the most powerful. He picked up his phone again, this time to call Ruth. She would know how to protect Maya and Sophie from this latest attack. The Ellis house had become a fortress of kindness, exactly what they all needed right now. The morning sun hadn't yet burned through the fog when Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her hospital supervisor. She tapped it open, still groggy, and felt her stomach drop. "Due to recent publicity and pending clarification of certain matters, you are placed on administrative leave effective immediately." Her hands shook as she scrolled through the morning's news headlines. Billionaire exploits single mother scandal for corporate gain. Questions arise about mother-daughter duo in HaleCorp drama. TrueCon claims whistleblower allegations orchestrated. Comments flooded social media, many clearly from fake accounts. Who lets their kid talk to strange men? Convenient story from a woman who can't keep a job. Rich guy playing hero with someone else's kid. Maya felt sick. She stumbled to Ruth's kitchen, where the older woman was already making coffee. One look at Maya's face, and Ruth pulled out a chair. "Sit down, honey. Let me get you some tea instead." Maya's phone buzzed again. This time it was worse. Much worse. Child Protective Services wanted to schedule a home visit to assess Sophie's living situation due to concerns about stability. The sob that tore from Maya's throat brought Ruth running. "They're going to take her," Maya choked out. "They're going to take my baby." Ruth wrapped her strong arms around Maya's shaking shoulders. "No, they are not. We won't let that happen." Ruth was already dialing Evan's number when Sophie appeared in her pink pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mama? Why are you crying?" Maya tried to smile, but another sob escaped. Sophie ran to her mother, climbing into her lap like she used to when she was smaller. "Don't cry, Mama. The bad men can't hurt us here. Miss Ruth said so." Evan arrived within 20 minutes, still knotting his tie. His face was grim as Ruth explained the situation. He sat down across from Maya, his voice gentle but firm. "Maya, listen to me. This is exactly what Brad wanted, to make you feel powerless. But you're not alone. We have documentation of their fraud. We have proof they forged your signature. And now we have evidence of their coordinated harassment campaign." "But CPS," Maya whispered. "We'll see a loving mother who removed her daughter from an unsafe situation and found shelter with a respected community leader." Ruth finished. They'll see Sophie attending school regularly, well cared for, surrounded by support. And they'll see a woman who chose to report dangerous practices that could have hurt countless patients. Evan added, That takes integrity. Sophie, who had been quietly drawing at the counter, brought her picture over. It showed stick figures holding hands, a tall one labelled Mama, a small one labelled Me, and others marked Miss Ruth, Mr. Evan, and Mr. Cal. See, Mama, we have lots of help now. Maya hugged her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Evan watched them, his jaw set with determination. He pulled out his phone and began typing. By evening, his statement was released to every major news outlet. I first met Maya Torres and her daughter Sophie on a rainy evening when an 8-year-old girl showed more courage than most adults I know. Maya Torres is not a victim or an opportunist. She is a healthcare worker who refused to stay silent about dangerous practices that put patients at risk. The ongoing audit will reveal the truth about who really betrayed the public trust. In the meantime, I stand firmly behind Maya's integrity and her right to protect both her daughter and her community without intimidation. The statement sparked a firestorm. News vans parked at the end of Ruth's street. Online debates raged, but something else happened too. Neighbors began leaving casseroles on Ruth's porch. Church members organized prayer circles. Veterans from Cal's old unit patrolled the street. Sophie's teacher sent home a card signed by her whole class. When the CPS worker arrived, she found a clean, stable home filled with community support. She saw Sophie's artwork on the fridge, her school books neatly arranged, and a little girl who clearly felt safe and loved. That evening, as Ruth served dinner to their usual group, now including Evan, Maya finally felt her shoulders relax. Sophie was safe upstairs, doing homework with Ruth's teenage granddaughter. The house smelled like fresh bread and coffee. I don't know how to thank you all, Maya said quietly. You already have, Cal replied, passing her the butter. By showing folks that doing right matters more than doing easy. Ruth squeezed Maya's hand. Sometimes the Lord sends angels in strange ways, she said with a meaningful look at Evan. Even in expensive suits. Evan actually blushed. I'm no angel, just someone trying to make things right. Outside, porch lights flickered on up and down the street, a small army of stars pushing back the darkness. Maya was exhausted, but for the first time in days, she felt something else too. Hope. The county courthouse loomed ahead, its stone steps already crowded with reporters and cameras. Maya gripped Sophie's hand tighter as they approached. Ruth walked beside them, a steady presence in her Sunday best, while Cal and Evan flanked them like protective shadows. Remember, Ruth whispered, just speak your truth, dear. That's all anyone can ask. The marble halls echoed with their footsteps as they made their way to courtroom C. Sophie's Mary Jane shoes clicked against the floor. Maya had polished them last night until they shone. The little girl wore her best blue dress, her dark hair neatly braided by Ruth that morning. Inside the courtroom, Maya's hands trembled as she took the oath. But when she began speaking, her voice came out clear and strong. My daughter's safety has always been my first priority, she testified, meeting the judge's eyes. When we faced threats, I moved us to a secure environment with Ruth Ellis, a respected community member. Sophie hasn't missed a single day of school. She has her own room, regular meals, and a support system that includes church members, teachers, and neighbors. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair, nodded encouragingly. And your employment status? I'm currently on administrative leave from Memorial Hospital, but I have savings and have been helping at Ruth's medical clinic. The Ellis family has welcomed us into their home until this situation resolves. When Evan took the stand next, his presence seemed to fill the room. He spoke with quiet authority about the ongoing audit. Your Honor, our investigation has already uncovered multiple instances where signatures, including Ms. Torres's, were forged on safety compliance documents. We've found evidence of systematic falsification of inventory records that put patient safety at risk. Maya Torres reported these violations through proper channels before any harassment began. The judge studied the preliminary audit documents. This is concerning, Mr. Hale. However, state investigators need time to verify these findings independently. The court's primary concern is Sophie's stability during this process. She looked directly at Maya. While I see strong community support here, protocol requires us to complete a 30-day review period. Please continue working with your assigned caseworker. Maya's heart sank, but she kept her head high. Sophie, who had been sitting quietly between Ruth and Cal, reached for her mother's hand as they stood. Outside, the media circus erupted. Camera flashes burst like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. Ms. Torres, are you being paid for your silence? Mr. Hale, why are you personally involved in this case? Is this a publicity stunt for Hale Corp's image? Evan moved swiftly, shielding Maya and Sophie with his open coat as they hurried down the courthouse steps. Cal and Ruth closed ranks around them, creating a protective bubble through the chaos. They drove straight to the First Methodist Church, where members had already gathered for an evening prayer meeting. The old sanctuary glowed with warm light as the sun set outside. Wooden pews creaked as people made room for them. Sophie curled up against Maya's side, exhausted from the long day. The familiar smell of lemon polish and old hymnals wrapped around them like a comfortable blanket. Pastor Williams led them in prayer, his weathered voice rising to the rafters. Lord, we lift up our sister Maya and little Sophie. Grant them strength in this season of waiting. Guide those who seek truth, and open the eyes of those who need to see it. After the formal prayers, people lingered to offer hugs and words of encouragement. Mrs. Chen from the bakery pressed a box of Sophie's favorite cookies into their hands. Sophie's teacher brought a stack of get-well cards her classmates had made. Cal found Maya by the coffee urn, her untouched cup growing cold. You did good today, he said quietly. His steady presence reminded her of her own father. But 30 more days. Maya's voice cracked. Paperwork can lie, but people see the truth, Cal said, gesturing to the gathered congregation. Look around. Every person here knows who you really are. That matters more than any file. Evan had been fielding calls in the church office. He joined them now, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. I've just spoken with our audit team, he said. I'm expediting the process. We'll have verified findings well before those 30 days are up. You don't have to. Maya began. Yes, I do. Evan cut in gently. Not just for you and Sophie, but for every patient who depends on our medical supplies being safe and properly tracked. This matters. Ruth appeared with a sleepy Sophie in tow. Time to get this little one to bed. Tomorrow's another school day. As they walked to Ruth's car under the evening stars, Maya felt the weight of the day pressing down. 30 days seemed like forever. But looking at the people around her, Ruth's quiet strength, Cal's steady certainty, Evan's determined support, and most of all, Sophie's unwavering trust, she knew she could endure it. Sophie was already half asleep when Maya tucked her in that night. Mama, she murmured, the judge lady seemed nice. She'll understand when she sees all our friends, right? Maya smoothed her daughter's hair back. Yes, baby, she will. Downstairs, Ruth was making tea, while Cal and Evan discussed logistics for the coming days. Maya paused in the doorway, overwhelmed by gratitude for these people who had become her family's guardians. The wall clock ticked steadily, counting down the minutes of their 30-day wait. But Maya knew Cal was right. The truth had a way of making itself known. She just had to stay strong until then. The clock struck 9 when Ruth's phone rang, breaking the evening quiet. She didn't recognize the number, but something in her spirit told her this call mattered. "Mrs. Ellis?" The man's voice was barely above a whisper, urgent and strained. "This is Tom Kincaid, Brad's brother. I need to talk. Somewhere safe. I can't do this anymore." Ruth's hand tightened on the receiver, her pulse quickening. "Are you all right, Tom? You sound troubled." "No, ma'am. I haven't been all right for months." His voice cracked with emotion. "But I can't stay quiet anymore. Not after what I've seen. Could we meet at Mr. Cal's garage? I remember he helps veterans like me. I trust him." Ruth glanced at Cal, who sat across from her reading the newspaper. He immediately nodded, his weathered face serious. He didn't need to hear the whole conversation to understand someone needed help. "Give us 30 minutes, Tom. We'll be there waiting," Ruth assured him, her voice steady and warm. She called Evan and Maya next, keeping her explanation brief but urgent. Within 20 minutes, their cars pulled up quietly behind Cal's detached garage, headlights extinguished before they reached the gravel driveway. The workshop lights cast long, angular shadows across the oil-stained concrete floor. Tools hung in perfect military order on the walls, Cal's refuge where order made sense when the world didn't. Tom arrived on foot, looking over his shoulder twice before slipping through the side door. He wore a worn Marine's cap pulled low, his face partially hidden beneath it. His shoulders were hunched, his posture defensive. Nothing like his brother's aggressive, domineering stance. Cal recognized the look of a man carrying too much weight. Not physical, but the crushing burden of conscience. "Come in, son," Cal said softly, closing the heavy door behind them with a reassuring click. He turned the deadbolt without making a show of it. Tom's hands shook visibly as he sat on an old metal chair. His knuckles were white, fingers clasping and unclasping nervously. "I'm sorry it took me so long," he began, voice cracking like dry twigs. "I should have come forward weeks ago. Brad, he made me change the shipping records, said it was just paperwork, just helping the numbers match up. Corporate games, he called it. But then he wanted me to copy Maya's signature on safety documents, and I knew we'd crossed into something terrible." Maya stepped forward from the shadows, her face a careful mask of composure. Tom flinched at the sight of her, but forced himself to meet her eyes, shame evident in his expression. "I forged your name on those safety forms," he confessed, each word seeming to physically pain him. "Brad said if I didn't, he'd make sure I never worked again. Said he'd tell people I had PTSD episodes, that I was unstable. I knew it was wrong, but I was scared. I have a mortgage, bills, it's no excuse, but I was weak." Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks, catching in his stubble. "My brother wasn't always like this. The Marines taught us honor, integrity, brotherhood. But somewhere along the way, Brad lost his soul to ambition. Started small, cutting corners, padding numbers, then got bigger and bigger until people's safety didn't matter anymore." Ruth moved closer, her nurse's instincts responding to pain like a compass finding north. "You're doing the right thing now, Tom. That takes real courage. The kind they can't teach you even in the Marines." Tom pulled a small thumb drive from his pocket with trembling fingers. It looked tiny and insignificant in his calloused hand, but everyone in the room understood its immense value. "I kept copies, everything, every altered record, every threatening text from Brad, email chains where they discussed which inspections to skip, even recorded some conversations when things got bad. I started keeping records to protect myself, but then I realized, this isn't just about me anymore." He handed it to Evan, reluctance and relief battling in his expression. "I'm willing to testify, to say everything I know. But could we keep my name quiet for now? Just until it's official? Brad has friends in low places, people who wouldn't think twice about causing problems." Of course, Evan assured him, carefully pocketing the drive. Our legal team will protect your identity as a whistleblower. The law is on your side, Tom. Ruth's clear voice rose in the quiet garage, her eyes closed and hands clasped. Lord, we thank you for giving Tom the strength to choose truth over fear. Watch over him as you've watched over Maya and Sophie through these dark times. Guide us all toward justice and protect those who stand for what's right, even when it costs them greatly. Amen, Cal added quietly, squeezing Tom's shoulder with a firm, reassuring grip. Soldier to soldier. Maya stepped forward again, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you, she said simply. I know how hard this must be. Going against family is never easy. Tom nodded, unable to speak, a lifetime of complicated emotions playing across his face. Cal offered to drive him home, but he declined, standing up straighter than when he'd arrived. Better if I walk, less noticeable. I know how to disappear in plain sight. After Tom left, slipping away through back streets like a shadow, Evan immediately called his head of legal from Cal's office phone. I'm sending you files now. Timestamp everything. We'll need protection orders ready by morning. For Maya, Sophie, and now Tom Kincaid. This goes deeper than we thought. The computer hummed as files transferred, its blue light illuminating their intent faces. Maya watched the progress bar inch forward, each percentage bringing them closer to vindication, to a life where she didn't have to look over her shoulder. He really kept everything, she whispered, amazement in her voice. Every single form. Marines are taught to document, Cal explained, pouring coffee into chipped mugs. Tom may have been afraid, but his training stuck. If it isn't written down, it didn't happen. First rule of military operations. Ruth made coffee while they waited, moving around Cal's space with the easy familiarity of decades. The familiar scent filled the garage, mixing with motor oil and metal. Their small group huddled together, watching history upload bite by bite, a digital testament to corruption and courage. When the transfer completed, Evan quickly typed an email to his legal team, copying key people who needed to know immediately. His finger hovered over the send button for just a moment before pressing down firmly. It's done, he said quietly. The proof was finally in the right hands. The wheels of justice would now begin turning in earnest. Maya released a shaky breath that seemed to come from her very soul. After weeks of being called a liar, of fighting to keep Sophie, of depending on others' belief in her word alone, now there was solid evidence, concrete proof that couldn't be dismissed as a disgruntled employee's accusations. Ruth pulled her into a warm hug, enveloping her like only a mother figure can. See? God's timing is perfect, even when we can't understand the wait. He was working all along, preparing Tom's heart to do the right thing. They knew Brad would strike back hard when he realized his brother had turned. His vindictive nature wouldn't allow this betrayal to go unpunished. But for this moment, in this humble garage that smelled of coffee and hope, truth had won a battle in the ongoing war. Let's get you two home, Ruth said to Maya, gathering her purse. Sophie will be wondering where her mama is, and that child needs to see your face before she sleeps. As they prepared to leave, Cal methodically checked every lock and security light, testing each one twice. Some habits never left a Marine, especially when protecting his own. His eyes scanned the perimeter one final time, looking for anything out of place. Evan walked Maya to Ruth's car, both of them knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But tonight, they had proof. Tonight, the truth had found its voice through an unexpected ally. Tom's courage had changed everything. His decision to stand for what was right, despite the personal cost, had tipped the scales. Now they just had to weather what came next. And with this evidence, they finally had the shield they needed. The morning brought chaos like a sudden storm. Evan sat stunned in his office as the board's decision was delivered. Effective immediately, he was suspended from all executive duties pending review. "This is temporary, of course," the board chairman said smoothly. "Just until we can properly investigate your personal involvement in this situation." Evan's hands clenched beneath his desk. "You mean until you can bury the evidence?" "That's exactly the kind of inflammatory statement we're concerned about," the chairman replied. "Your judgment appears compromised." Before Evan could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent alert. Brad's lawyers had filed a multi-million-dollar defamation suit against both him and Maya. Outside Ruth's house, the media circus was growing. News vans lined the quiet street, cameras trained on the front door. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who came near. Inside, Maya pressed a hand against the window curtain, watching the chaos. "I never meant for all this," she whispered. Her face was pale, her hand trembling. "Maya." Ruth noticed her swaying. "Honey, sit down." But Maya's knees buckled before she could reach a chair. Ruth caught her as she slumped, easing her to the floor. "Cal," Ruth called sharply. Her nurse's training kicked in as she checked Maya's pulse. Cal burst in from the back door, where he'd been monitoring reporters. "Everyone inside now," he ordered to the few church volunteers who'd been helping keep watch. He knelt beside Maya as Ruth pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. "Just fainted," Ruth assured him. The stress finally caught up with her. "Where's Sophie?" "Safe in the basement with Mrs. Miller. She's got her doing art projects." Maya's eyes fluttered open. "Sophie?" she mumbled. "She's fine, sweetheart." Ruth soothed. "Let's get you to the couch." Cal helped Maya up, his weathered face tight with concern. Once she was settled, he stationed himself by the front window, watching the reporters with hard eyes. "Like vultures?" he muttered. No respect for privacy anymore. Across town, Evan sat in his truck in the church parking lot. The same church where, just days ago, the congregation had prayed for truth and justice. Now he felt more alone than ever. His phone kept buzzing. Lawyers, PR team, board members, all demanding answers. He switched it off. The easy path was clear. Back down, let the lawyers handle it. Preserve his position and wealth. He could still help Maya financially from a distance. But Sophie's face flashed in his mind. Her trust when she'd first asked for help in the rain, her joy feeding ducks at the park. He thought of his grandmother, who'd raised him with unwavering principles. "What good is power if we won't use it to protect others?" she used to say. Evan pulled out his laptop. Not as CEO, but as a private citizen, he began typing a public statement. The words flowed with quiet certainty. "I speak today not as an executive, but as a human being who witnessed injustice and chose not to look away." Meanwhile, across the city, Tom's phone rang. His brother's number. His hand shook as he answered, but he'd prepared for this moment. "You ungrateful little rat," Brad hissed. "After everything I did for you? You mean after you forced me to break the law?" Tom's voice was steady as he pressed record on his second phone. "No more, Brad." "I'll destroy you," Brad threatened. "No one will hire you. I'll make sure everyone knows what a failure you are." "Go ahead," Tom interrupted. "I'd rather be honest and broke than rich and corrupt like you. You're dead to me." Brad spat. "You hear me? Dead. Goodbye, Brad." Tom ended the call, his hands shaking but his conscience clear. The recording saved automatically to his secure cloud storage. One more piece of evidence against his brother's schemes. Back at Ruth's house, Maya sat up slowly, sipping water Ruth had brought her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just felt so overwhelmed." "Don't you dare apologize." Ruth said firmly. "You're carrying burdens that would crush most people." Cal moved from his watch position to sit beside them. "Enemies trying to wear you down," he said quietly. "That's what they do. Keep pushing until you break, but they don't know about your reinforcements. God's timing is perfect," Ruth reminded them. "He brought us Tom's evidence just when we needed it most." Maya nodded, drawing strength from their steady faith. Outside, the reporters continued their vigil, but inside this home, truth and love stood guard. Evan remained in his truck, finishing his statement as darkness fell. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but tonight, across the city, people of conscience had drawn their lines in the sand. No turning back now. The town hall's old wooden floors creaked under the weight of hundreds of folding chairs. Ruth surveyed the rapidly filling room, her heart swelling at the sight of casserole dishes and determined faces. Cal's veteran buddies, wearing their familiar baseball caps with military insignias, stood guard at each entrance. "Like old times," Cal murmured, squeezing her hand. "Remember those field hospitals? Everyone pitching in?" Ruth nodded, adjusting the microphone stand. "Except this time we're healing truth, not wounds." People kept streaming in, nurses from Maya's hospital, church members, small business owners, even teenagers wearing "Stand with Sophie" t-shirts they'd made themselves. The local radio station had set up equipment in one corner, while 2 TV news vans idled outside. Tom Kincaid sat alone in a back room, his hands clasped tightly. When Ruth checked on him, she found him praying. "You don't have to do this," she said gently. He looked up, eyes red but steady. "Yes, Mum, I do. For Maya. For everyone my brother hurt." At 7 o'clock sharp, Ruth took the stage. The crowd fell silent. "Welcome to Truth in Daylight," she began, her nurse's voice carrying clearly. "We're here because one woman was brave enough to speak up, and others were brave enough to listen." She introduced Tom first. He walked to the microphone slowly, like a man approaching necessary pain. His hands shook as he held up his phone. "This is my brother Brad," he said quietly. "Threatening me last night for telling the truth." The recording played through the speakers. Brad's voice, twisted with rage, filled the hall. "I'll destroy you. No one will hire you. You're dead to me." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman near the front covered her mouth. But Tom wasn't finished. "I worked in his warehouse," he continued, stronger now. "He made us fake safety records, made us forge signatures, including Maya Torres. When anyone objected, he'd threaten their jobs, their families." The room remained absolutely still. News cameras whirred. "I was a Marine." Tom's voice cracked. "Taught to protect people. Instead, I helped hurt them. I'm sorry. So sorry." Ruth touched his shoulder as he stepped down. The silence held for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in until the applause thundered through the hall. Evan rose next, carrying a thick folder. He looked different tonight. No tie, just a simple button-down shirt. More citizen than CEO. "The audit confirms everything," he began. "Falsified inventory records, forged signatures, unsafe medical supplies shipped to hospitals, including where Maya Torres worked." He held up document after document, reading damning excerpts, dates, times, dollar amounts that had been changed. "Maya spotted these discrepancies," he continued. "She reported them through proper channels. For that she was threatened, slandered, nearly lost her daughter." His voice grew stronger. "When I became CEO, I promised to run an ethical company. Tonight, my board may be preparing to remove me for investigating this. So be it." He looked straight into the news cameras. "If I have to choose between a title and our neighbor's safety, that's no choice at all." The crowd erupted. People jumped to their feet, cheering and clapping. Someone shouted, "God bless you, Mr. Hale!" Ruth wiped tears from her eyes as she watched. Cal slipped an arm around her waist. "Reminds me of that young lieutenant in Nam," he whispered, "the one who refused to bomb the village. Did the right thing, no matter what?" Ruth smiled. "Exactly." Across town, Brad Kincaid sat in his darkened office, watching the live stream on his laptop. His face grew paler with each revelation. When Tom's recording played, he slammed the screen shut. His phone buzzed, messages from the board, from lawyers, from reporters. He ignored them all, grabbing his keys and briefcase instead. The parking garage was empty as he hurried to his car. His hands trembled, dropping the keys twice before he managed to unlock the door. The engine roared to life, and he peeled out into the night, leaving only tire marks behind. Back at Town Hall, Ruth took the microphone one final time. "The truth fears no light," she said simply. "And neither do good people. Thank you all for standing with us tonight." The crowd began to mingle, sharing food and stories. Tom found himself surrounded by veterans, accepting handshakes and quiet words of support. Evan stayed late, talking with anyone who approached him, his security detail watching carefully from a distance. The truth was out now, shining bright as day. There would be no more hiding in shadows. The morning sun had barely risen when black SUVs rolled into TrueCon's parking lot. State investigators in windbreakers emblazoned with Fraud Division moved swiftly through the glass doors, warrant folders in hand. Inside his office, Brad Kincaid was deleting files when they entered. "Step away from the computer, sir," an agent ordered. Brad's face drained of color as they led him out in handcuffs, past shocked employees recording with their phones. Across town, another team approached Stephen Laird's mansion. The Hale Corp executive was already in his Mercedes, attempting to leave, when patrol cars boxed him in. "It's over, Mr. Laird," the lead investigator said firmly. At Ruth's house, Maya and Sophie watched the arrests unfold on the morning news. Sophie curled against her mother on the couch, while Ruth brought them hot chocolate. "Are the bad men going away?" Sophie asked quietly. Maya hugged her daughter close. "Yes, sweetheart. They can't hurt us anymore." The phone rang. It was Evan. "Turn on Channel 5, he said, his voice bright. "The board's about to make their announcement." They switched channels to see Hale Corp's chairman standing at a podium. "We deeply regret our failure to support Mr. Hale's investigation," he read. "The board unanimously votes to reinstate him as CEO, with our sincere apologies. His ethical leadership represents the very best of corporate responsibility." Ruth squeezed Maya's shoulder as happy tears fell. "God's timing is perfect," she whispered. Later that morning, the governor held a press conference on the courthouse steps. "This case shows what happens when citizens stand together for truth," she declared. "From whistleblowers to veterans to business leaders, this town's unity in the face of corruption sets an example for our entire state." Reporters who had once questioned Maya's credibility now praised her courage. "Mothers stand against corporate fraud inspires reform," read one headline. "Town rallies to protect truth teller," proclaimed another. At the hospital, Maya returned to work for the first time in weeks. She paused outside the entrance, taking a deep breath. But inside, she found her desk covered with flowers and welcome back cards from co-workers. "We always knew you were telling the truth," her supervisor said, hugging her. "I'm so sorry I doubted even for a moment." That Sunday, the church was packed. When Ruth walked in, the entire congregation rose, applauding. She tried to wave it off, embarrassed by the attention, but Cal gently pushed her forward. "Sometimes angels wear nurses' scrubs," the pastor said, making everyone laugh. Ruth showed us how to stand firm in faith and love. After the service, Evan shared his plans with Ruth and Maya over coffee in the church basement. "We're creating a national whistleblower protection program," he explained. "Independent oversight, anonymous reporting channels, legal support funds. No one should face what Maya did for doing the right thing." "Will it be named after Sophie?" Ruth asked with a twinkle in her eye. "Since she started all this by being brave enough to ask for help?" Evan smiled, watching Sophie play with other children nearby. "The Sophie Torres Initiative," he mused. "Has a nice ring to it." Maya shook her head, still amazed by how much had changed. "A month ago, I thought I'd lose everything for speaking up. Now you've helped make sure others won't have to make that choice." Ruth finished. "That's how light spreads, one person at a time, standing for truth." Outside, spring flowers bloomed in the church garden. The morning sun caught their petals, scattering tiny rainbows across the grass. Inside, people lingered over coffee, sharing stories and plans, their voices warm with hope. The state investigators continued their work, methodically building cases against Brad and Stephen. Early evidence suggested their scheme had endangered patients in multiple hospitals, making the criminal charges even more serious. In their holding cells, both men faced the consequences of their choices. Brad's brother Tom visited him once, not to gloat but to pray, showing the mercy their family had rarely known. At Hale Corp, Evan began implementing new safety protocols immediately. Every employee received training on ethical reporting procedures. Supply chain verification became transparent and thorough. The board, chastened by their earlier mistake, supported these reforms fully. The CPS caseworker arrived at Ruth's house with the official closure documents. She apologized to Maya personally for any distress the investigation had caused. "Your daughter is clearly safe and loved," she said warmly. "Not just by you, but by an entire community. That's the best protection any child could have." Sophie celebrated by drawing another picture, this time of her mother standing tall, surrounded by friends. She gave it to Ruth to hang in the church office. The town's unity had transformed a story of corruption into one of hope. Local businesses put up signs supporting whistleblower protection. Veterans groups offered security training to other communities facing similar issues. The ripples of change spread outward, touching lives far beyond their small city. Maya's co-workers created a safety advocacy group, sharing best practices across the hospital system. Her calm testimony during the crisis had earned their lasting respect. And through it all, Ruth's phone kept ringing. People asking how they could help, how they could replicate this model of community support in their own towns. She directed them with her usual practical wisdom, turning good intentions into concrete action. The truth had prevailed, not just through documents and investigations, but through the countless small acts of courage that had sustained them all. From Sophie's first cry for help in the rain to today's reforms, each person's choice to stand firm had strengthened the others. 3 months passed like a gentle spring breeze. The riverside sparkled under a warm May sun as crowds gathered near the newly constructed Hale Corp distribution hub. The modern building gleamed with its glass facade reflecting the blue sky, but it was the atmosphere of celebration that truly made everything shine. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze while local musicians played soft melodies. Children ran around with ribbons, their laughter mixing with the sound of the flowing river nearby. The parking lot had been transformed into a community fair, with food trucks and information booths about workplace safety. Maya stood at the podium, her professional suit a far cry from the frightened woman of months ago. Her eyes were bright with pride as she surveyed the crowd. Beside her, Evan wore not his usual business attire, but a simple button-down shirt and khakis, looking more like a neighbor than a CEO. "This isn't just a building," Maya addressed the gathering. It's a promise to every worker, every family, that doing right matters more than doing what's easy. Sophie, wearing a pretty yellow dress, bounced excitedly next to her mother. A large red ribbon stretched across the hub's entrance, waiting for its moment. Ruth and Cal sat in the front row, holding hands. The former army nurse had refused to have the initiative named solely after her, insisting Cal's quiet strength had been just as vital. The plaque beside the entrance read, "Ruth and Cal. Initiative. Integrity in action," in elegant bronze letters. "Before we cut this ribbon," Evan stepped forward, "I want to thank someone who taught me what real courage looks like." He smiled at Sophie. "Would you do the honors, young lady?" Sophie's face lit up as she took the oversized scissors. The crowd counted down. 3, 2, 1. The ribbon fell away as cheers erupted. The church choir, positioned near the entrance, began singing "Amazing Grace," their voices rising clear and strong in the morning air. Inside, the hub was a model of modern safety protocols. Every station had emergency procedures clearly posted. Digital displays showed real-time inventory tracking. A wall of windows overlooked the training center where workers would learn proper handling techniques. Maya walked through the facility, remembering how different things had been just months ago. Now she would oversee safety outreach, ensuring other facilities followed these same standards. Her new office had a view of both the river and the playground, where Sophie would be able to visit after school. "Mom, look!" Sophie called out, pointing to a framed photo in the lobby. It showed their town gathering at that crucial town hall meeting, hundreds of faces united for truth. Below it was a simple quote, "Community is the strongest safety net." The choir's voices floated through the open doors as people mingled, sharing stories and hope. Veterans who had helped protect Maya now trained as safety supervisors. Church members who had brought casseroles during the crisis were touring the facility, proud of their part in the change. Evan stood among them, not apart, accepting handshakes and hugs with genuine warmth. He'd learned that true leadership meant being part of the community, not above it. Sophie broke away from the tour group and ran to him, her yellow dress twirling. She grabbed his hand, her face serious despite the joyful atmosphere. "You kept your promise," she whispered, looking up at him. "We're safe now." Evan knelt down to her level, the way he had that first rainy day. "Yes," he said softly. "We all are." Above them, the clouds parted, sending streams of sunlight through the windows. The golden rays touched everything, the safety placards, the family photos, the gathered faces, as if blessing this new beginning. The choir's final notes of "Amazing Grace" rose to the rafters, carried on waves of hope restored.